Welcome back to New Persuasive Words. I'm Scott Jones.
And I'm Bill Bohr.
Bill, I am not jokey. Sorry. I'm picking up something.
I hear that. Yeah, you are picking up something.
I don't know why that is. Let me see what's going on here.
Radio Free Philadelphia there, right?
Exactly. Oh, I see why. That's because my YouTube channel was in the background. There we go. All right, here we go. Bill, this is not happy-go-lucky Trump impersonating Scott today. I am unusually. I don't know if stern is the. No, that's not the proper.
Sober, pensive.
I want to read you something, Bill.
All right, read it to me.
This is from the Free Press. It originally appeared in Commentary magazine. I think Free Press reran it.
All right.
It's by Seth Mendel, who is a commentator, journalist. I don't know what his other background is, but it's called The Meaning of Kfir Bibas. If Hamas's statement is true, this week will bring a tragic, though not unexpected, close to a painful episode. The fate of the rest of the Bibas family. Yarden Bibas was released this month by Hamas after nearly 500 days in captivity, and the terror group claims it will soon deliver the bodies of his wife, Shiri, and two sons, Ariel and Kfir. Ariel was 4 when he was taken on October 7th, 2023, and Kfir was 9 months old. To be Jewish has meant experiencing a crushing disappointment in the world since the Hamas attacks that started this war. A stray line in one of the many articles about the Bibas family today unintentionally offers a crystal clear explanation for that disappointment. For many Israelis, the New York Times writes, the story of the Bibas family has become a symbol of the brutality of the Hamas-led October 7th attack. That sentence is accurate, but in another universe, one where the international community, quote unquote, cares a whit for justice and human decency, the sentence would read this way. For everyone, the story of the Bibas family has become a symbol of the brutality of the Hamas-led October 7th attack. In such a world, the faces of the Bibas children would be everywhere at all times. In the world in which we live, by contrast, posters with those faces get torn down from bulletin boards. In the kind of world we hope to deserve to inhabit, no children's charity or NGO would go a day without drawing attention to Kfir and Ariel and the monsters who stole them. The crimes against the Bibas family are indeed the symbol of the anti-civilization menace that is Hamas, but also of the cowardice of the political and cultural leaders of the enlightened West. Yes, we should be ashamed of our fellow Americans, who not only won't mention the Bibas family, but won't even learn the name of a single American hostage held in Gaza throughout the war. At last year's Oscars, a line of pro-Palestine stars, Mark Ruffalo, Billie Eilish, Ava DuVernay, and others wore a pin of a red right hand meant to valorize the murderers of Jews. In a just world, all these celebrities would instead use their time on the red carpet to do anything at all, other than express public sympathy for the Bibas' children's kidnappers. It shouldn't be only Jews who see Kfir Bibas' smiling face and bright red hair when they close their eyes. In that famous picture of baby Bibas, he is holding a small pink stuffed elephant. Kfir's relatives spent over a year searching the rubble of Nir Oz, where the family lived, for that pink elephant. It turned up, finally, in January, in what his aunt hoped would be a good sign. As the pro-Palestinian mobs filled the streets of every major city to celebrate Hamas's slaughter, Jews around the world looked at them dumbfounded. They kidnapped a baby. How much does one have to hate Jews to side with the monsters who kidnap babies? A lot is the answer, an unpleasant realization Jews came to over the past 16 months. Kfir's face became a symbol of the conflict because it represented a line that had been crossed and cannot be uncrossed. Members of Congress giddily attended Tentifada demonstrations that were no longer simply pro-Palestine or anti-colonial. They were about defending those who stole Kafir from his home and dragged him to Gaza, where, according to Hamas, he died. And it is impossible for the rest of us to pretend that we didn't see a chunk of society, whether in person or online, rush to cross that line and cheer the people who kidnapped a baby. Kafir became a symbol because he's the answer to every relevant question about this conflict. His case is the war boiled down to its essence. Kafir is the dividing line. In a better world, there'd be no one standing on the wrong side of it. There you go, Bill. That's largely my feelings.
Yeah. And since that was written, they had done an autopsy, and actually one of the children had been strangled. They were not killed by. They originally said the family had been killed by Israeli attacks, bombing, but the one child had been strangled. So one of the captors took a baby and was able to kill the child with their bare hands. Yeah.
But Bill, this is what's interesting to me. You can't go a day without hearing many on the left, progressives, many Democrats, saying that we're in Nazi Germany, that Donald Trump is Hitler, that his supporters are brown shirts, that we're in the moment where democracy is dying or has died. Some of my friends have said it's dead already now that Trump has been elected. Clearly, the Trump supporters are morally superior to the people that are cheering the bodies of dead, murdered children. Clearly, well, I mean, but there's not the same. On what issues aren't there? On what issue are the people cheering superior to the Trump supporter?
No, I know you were talking about the. Well, I think I've heard similar demonization of people of they're okay that Palestinian children were killed as well. See, one of the things I think is problematic, and you and I were part of a denomination that wanted to fight a war proxy, right? About this issue, that it was a black and white issue for many people. And the idea that we needed to take a side, instead of taking a side for children not being killed, and that would start out with Israeli children, because Hamas started this. October 7th was basically a massacre, for the most part, of unarmed people. And the savagery of the October 7th. I mean, one of the things I read this week was, have we done a service by censoring what actually happened? And even the caskets of these families. I don't know. Did you read how the caskets were delivered? They had, yeah. I mean, it was with
stickers and pamphlets and all this, and it's horrendous.
It was horrendous.
And people were cheering like Eagles fans at a parade. I mean, it was celebrate. I mean, this is disgusting. I mean, this is as great a sign of evil as I've seen in a while. And what's interesting is progressives can generate that outrage,
right? But why
for their fellow Americans? Who look, anybody that listens to this podcast knows there's not any Trump supporters here, and many of our fans remind us of how errant we are in that. Usually, you via correspondence, but but this, I'm just wondering where right. I love that line. The line at the end there, Kafir is the divine light. In a better world, there'd be no one standing on the wrong side of it. But there are people standing on the wrong side of it, Bill, and there are fellow Americans, and there are people in our party. There are people on our team, on our side of the political spectrum, in our tribe.
Right. Well, let's listen to what there are of all the things happening in the world, and all the needs in Vermont. Let me read to you what's coming. There's going to be a resolution.
You and Todd McGowan are both in Vermont. It's got just the redemptive power of you two being in that state together. I might move there.
All right, man. I'm hoping I want to meet him face to face. I'm actually going to be up near him in a couple of weeks. But here's what they demand. And now, okay, you need to understand Vermont. I mean, how do I describe? You have to drive places to get things. Like in other words, it's a lot of really small towns. There's still country stores, right? There's literally every little town's country store. So here, a couple communities around the state, none near me right now. But this is what's going to be. This is what a coalition. This is the this is the Vermont Coalition for Palestinian Liberation. All right. Here's what they're demanding: ceasefire now, stop Israel's genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, provide unrestricted humanitarian aid to all Palestinians, free all Palestinian prisoners and hostages, defend the civil rights of Palestinians and Palestinian solidarity activists, stop all U.S. aid to Israel, enforce boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel, end Israel's siege, occupation, and apartheid system, equal rights for Palestinians, including but not limited to Palestinians' right to self-determination and right to return. So in a state that cannot figure out school funding, all right, and who hasn't come to grips with a sensible flood prevention, all right, who has an acute housing problem, all right, this is going to be on the agenda of, and I love Vermont in terms of it. It's a very democracy. It's almost too
Do you
much.
know who can help with flooding problems?
Who?
Elon.
Oh, there we go. Well,
Trump said, I am doing Trump now. He said, and no, in that interview, he said in North Carolina, okay, they had so much water, like places that didn't even have water before. They have like oceans, like rivers, and everything's like destroyed. They say, okay, what can we do? And they say, call Elon, and he gets this Starlink, and they have he brings in. I didn't even know what it was. He brought in Starlink. So, Bill, Starlink is the answer.
By the way, the Republican state blocked funding over some sort of political thing to the severely affected West, over some sort of gerrymandering thing. But anyway, so again, I'm with you on this. I mean, I think, particularly when we take a side, okay, right, that when we take a side, a partisan side, that almost forgoes our ability to speak as humans, right? To speak in a more universal way. In other words, if there has to be someone who's the absolute enemy in this situation, someone who's not enemy, but the absolute evil in this situation, then you immediately lose a moral opportunity to speak any kind of clarity, or to have a common sense, basic human sense of decency to say killing, strangling, taking children as hostages and then strangling them, strangling a 9-month-old or the 4-year-old with your bare hands and defending that. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there's no moral universe where one can, with a straight face, take a stand. But you're right. There are thousands, if not maybe millions, of people who at least just would say that's horrible that child died, but in some ways indirectly they're saying, but they had it coming to them.
Yeah, this is like the feminist critique of when women are caught or assaulted, right? It's sort of like saying, well, what was she wearing? Well, it's like many on left saying, what was Israel wearing?
Right. No, it's I agree
that they got, they were asking for it.
Well, and the thing about it too is, okay, so Hamas is an organization that kills its own people. There is no dissonance. And God forbid you are queer or
but queers for Palestine. That's all the rage here among the kids. Among the kids, the young people,
but not in Palestine. you don't. I mean, not in Gaza under these folks. Matter of fact, the person, I forget his name, the guy that was killed while he was in Tehran. I guess he was one of the, I lost his name, but people cried that. But this is a guy who's made billions of dollars off of off of his own people. He was a billionaire when he died. 30 years ago, he was a laborer. He was a construction worker. And one of his jobs, how he worked his way up through Hamas, was beating and torturing dissidents and people who weren't falling in line with their particular view of Islam, which would include women who were trying to be educated, people who may even, there was a rumor that they might be gay. So the guy that they mourned and protested was the guy who earned his promotion by torturing people that I would think that most of those protesters would have some sympathy for.
Yeah, I'm one. Yeah, I mean, this is people, and again, these are things I don't support. But I mean, gosh, a 26-year-old in the a forestry bureaucrat or something gets his job cut. This is democracy's side of the darkness. We're in Nazi Germany. The brown shirts are coming. I mean, the level of outrage here.
But all right, but not everybody thinks this outrage. I mean, I'm outraged about what's happening with what the Trump administration is doing. I'm equally outraged at the anti-Semitism of the left. So I mean, there are.
Yeah, I mean, you are. I mean, you are, Bill.
I think there are lots of us.
You're not. You're not. There's not. I don't hear. Okay. I listened to NPR this morning. I watched the news. I live on the internet. I don't see big liberal mouthpieces going, this is the moral issue of the day. This is it. This is going too far. Where is that today? Where is Bill? Where?
Equally outraged. Oh, Jared.
By the way, for those of you who are just listening to the show for the first time, we're streaming it on Facebook Live. So if you're listening and have not seen the live stream, this goes out to the world live. And so we just got a comment from a listener, a clergy person, a friend, Jared Jones, who comments equally outraged.
But my whole thing is, and again, it's not morally equivalent. I mean, I'm sorry that a forester loses their job. That's not the moral equivalency to a child dying. However, that 5-year-old Palestinian girl who is in my mind, who was killed by an Israeli rocket in her grandmother's car. I don't forget that.
Yeah, but those are not. But here's the thing: those are not equivalent, right? In the sense of, look, children die in war, and it's terrible. It's awful. It's terrible. But children die in wars, in this particular conflict, because the Israel's opponent, Israel's enemy, doesn't abide by the rules of war. Puts military assets, personnel, weapons in schools, in apartments, in hospitals, right? They're not uniform combatants.
This child was killed in a car, a civilian car. So,
right. But I mean, was that car targeted, or was it? I mean, was it?
There's been again,
urban warfare, right? We have urban warfare.
Both things can be. So first of all, again, if Hamas chose to turn mosque, hospitals, and schools to military targets, and the rules of war allow once you put a rocket launcher on a hospital, it's become a military target. We did that in Iraq, right? We blew up hospitals and schools when we raided Iraq, and we morally justified that. And again, that's on Hamas, right? You and I've talked about it. You said the other day, Hamas won this war.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and so there's a sense where, again,
and for our listeners that don't get the context of that, I mean, what I've said to you many times is what Hamas is banking on is the heteroflexible or bisexual woman with the buzz cut, with the nose rings at Columbia or NYU, who's holding up the Queer for Palestine. Eventually, her heteroflexibility goes a little more on the hetero side. She gets married. At 37, she's a soccer mom with a couple kids. And she is the next generation at the Vermont school board writing these, let's get more anti-Israel books in the library. Let's teach our kids that Israel and Jews are genocidal people. That's their long game. They're thinking 20, 30 years ahead, that the generation that's protesting will eventually become adults and will turn public opinion against Israel long term.
Yeah, well, first of all, and by the way, if you don't get any hate mail for that little diatribe you just went on, then there is no justice among our listeners.
The email is Scott Kent Jones. That's with a T. Scott Kent Jones at gmail.com. Keep it coming. If I to quote FDR, I welcome their hatred.
That's
I welcome
it. And it would help him. If so you angry soccer moms out there, please send some of your love his direction. No, I think what's it again, I think I agree with you. And I don't think Hamas is actually strategically thinking 30 years down the road for Connecticut suburban women. But I do think in terms of Europe, I do think in terms of they don't really, it's obvious they don't care about their own citizenry. They have a different value. And so there's a sense that is in part why they won. They've won the rhetorical war in much of the West. Now, the thing about it, though, is, part of, we read Exodus 23 today. And it reminds us that you should not show favoritism to the poor when it comes to justice. And so there's a sense that if you're in a position of weakness, you still have moral agency, you still have culpability. And this is kind of the problem with neo-Marxism, right? Because if whoever is viewed to have the more power is immediately wrong. But that's just George
Hunsinger, my teacher once said, my question for the liberation theologian is, can a victim be a sinner?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and so I think it's, I'm really, I want to quote something here. This is from an Arab Israeli student who's part of by the way, something we don't hear about either from the right or the left. There are like 160 some organizations, Alliance for Middle Eastern Peace, that are grassroots Palestinian Israeli groups, and who are working for a better day. Matter of fact, what's miracle beyond miracle, because this war has been polarizing for both the Palestinian community and Israeli community. I mean, whatever the Second Intifada did in terms of moving Arabs and Israelis apart, this has done it on steroids. So it's understandable that this is there's a lot of anger in the region, and there's a lot of anger within Israel, and Arab Israelis are in difficult positions, right? But there have been multiple grassroots organizations that have started even during this among Palestinians, Arab Israelis, and Jewish Israelis. One of the things that's really interesting is, here's a quote from this is from Rabbi Michael Cohen, who was working for peace in the middle of a wartime. A remarkable man, said this: "We are constantly pressured to choose one side and hate the other, but picking a side is wrong, and it won't end the conflict. Both sides in this conflict are suffering. You have to solve the conflict for everyone. That is the path of morality and humanity." And I think that's, in terms of, I think that's from an Arab Israeli student who takes those positions. That person's at double, triple risk, right? He's a guy that many of the right in Israel are quite happy to have them have a second class citizenship. He's a person who gets pressure from his own community not to say such things. So, that's a very courageous position. But I think particularly as Christians, we have to have some moral clarity on this, and not fall into Israel certainly can and should be criticized, and they have violated their own rules in the course of this. Of
course, any liberal democracy is going to do these things and should be called to,
and there should be accountability. But I both said in some levels they have to. I mean, they certainly are under a lot more moral scrutiny than the United States or Russia or anyone else.
Yeah, you compare Israel to us in Iraq, or even us in World War II. They're more scrupulous, as far as wars, as far as tending to the rules of warfare. Yeah, I think Israel is probably the most scrupulous combatant in the world.
But again, I don't. Okay, we can say that it's morally reprehensible what Hamas did to those children, and we can say that if you've lost your moral clarity on that, you need to do some soul searching. That doesn't make us pro-Israeli. That makes us human.
I think it makes me. I think I'll say I'm pro-Israeli. Yeah,
Okay,
I'm pro-Israel.
right.
Yeah,
Well, all right, all right.
I have no problem. The email is scottkentjones@gmail.com.
All right. I go to synagogue almost every week. My wife is Jewish. So it's not, but I don't think it's my job to be, I think I want there to be peace. And
I'd like there to be peace too. I mean, absolutely. Who doesn't want there to be peace?
And I don't know.
You know who else wants there to be peace? Donald Trump. We'll make Gaza hotels. Okay. I mean,
I'm not sure Netanyahu wants peace.
Well, I think Netanyahu is a very savvy guy. I do not think he's an ideologue or a zealot. I think he plays the system, and I think
he has no morality. I think he's a moral. I think he's a man without morals.
I think he's a political survivor. Yes,
and I think probably 55% of his country would agree with me on that.
It's interesting because right now the polling this week, 70% of Israelis would rather see the hostages returned than the continuation of the war. So I don't know how Netanyahu is going to weigh that calculus, but I think, but the question becomes for those who are thinking long term. Look, if you end the war right now, if you have a crippled, not destroyed Hamas, if you show that ultimately, I mean, this would be the argument, right? Ultimately, hostage taking and terrorism works. It's a legitimate strategy for political ends that can be leveraged successfully. How many other lives do you put in danger? That would be the argument, right? By the short-term cessation of hostilities for a full return of hostages. I mean, what the hell does return of hostages mean now after what we saw this week? Oh God.
Well, there were 5 more that were released that were alive. The trouble
and they made them beg for their lives in front of the. I mean, this is disgusting.
No. It is disgusting. The trouble is, one thing maybe we have learned that you just can't kill by just trying to wipe out terrorism. By attack. By you can't really root out terrorism just by killing the leadership. We've apparently Al Qaeda is still around. We worked really hard. We spent a lot of money, and a lot of American lives are lost and permanently damaged because we destroyed Al Qaeda. But apparently we didn't quite do that. You and I joke, it's dark humor, but if you're looking to be part of an organization where there's a lot of upward mobility, Al Qaeda, to be the number 2 person Al Qaeda was
exactly. Lots of room for advancement. You see a guy in the recruiting commercial. Last week I was at a camp shooting AK-47. This week I'm senior recruiter.
The trouble, I do think there's a different situation because a lot of Iran's influence. I mean, Iran, again, you can't talk about Hamas without talking about Iran. And again, the apparent crippling of Hezbollah, although will remain to be seen what happens there. Iran's tentacles have been severely damaged. So there's a different calculus going on there in the Middle East now. And even with Syria, so all I'm saying is I don't know. It's a different situation in terms of ending the hostilities now, particularly when you've got I don't know. I'm if you're in the international community trying to figure out what America's going to do now, what Donald Trump's going to do now, and he's certainly not a reliable partner, but sometimes his craziness shakes things up. So there might be some movement in the region towards peace just because of the unpredictability of Donald Trump. I don't think that's a good long-term way to try to to bring about a new world order. But I do think ending it now is different than, say, 6 months ago. But anyway, go ahead.
I mean, I think the difference though with Iraq and Afghanistan is it's one thing to be involved in attempting preventative measures to stop the growth of terrorism in countries that are far away from you that you don't really understand. It's very different. Imagine Mexico was completely overrun by the cartels and was well, I mean, that's not that hard to imagine. Right? Okay. Imagine the cartels take over the government. Okay. All right. Okay. So imagine current Mexico just begins incursions into Texas and Southern California and starts kidnapping people, raping, pillaging, cutting heads off, terrorizing. What would we do? We would invade. We would conquer it. We would. I mean, because we just couldn't say we can't have an illiberal terroristic threat on our border, right? We just would not. There'd be no way. There would be no sort of equivalent. There would be no equivocating.
But the trouble is, okay, that as long the Palestinian situation remains somewhat in limbo, right? And I will also say, not only has this war radicalized people on both sides, but the last 10 years of turning a blind eye to the abuses in the West Bank, the taking of Palestinian land that was agreed upon that was Palestinian land by the Israelis, but the violence the settlers are doing against what is to be Palestinian where Palestinian sovereignty is supposed to be. I mean, I again, calling Israel an apartheid state is not accurate, and particularly with the emotional baggage that goes along with that. But the longer this thing goes on, and I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying there's a clear solution, but the difference between, say, Mexico invading Texas and taking it back because originally it was theirs, but whatever reason, and Gaza or what has happened also, it's the radicalization of the West Bank as well. The more you keep people in powerless situations and with an undetermined future, it does allow the kind of corruption that there's been in the Palestinian Authority. I mean, one of the reasons Hamas was able to take over in part was because of the corruption of the Palestinian Authority, the Fatah, the party that was the heir to the Palestinian Liberation Army, or PLO. I mean, they were corrupt, and they were utterly corrupt, and they didn't help their own people. So there is a situation. It's a very small area. It's a very close neighborhood over there, and to keep people on a kind of the margins, that's not a solution. Now, again, I'm not offering one.
Yeah, I mean, but the problem is, right? I think that is. I think intractable, right? I mean, this is Huntington Clash of Civilization stuff, right? You have.
What would you do for the Palestinians? What do you think the Palestinian solution is?
Well, I don't know. There is a solution. I think what you have is, like all our conflicts in the world, every single conflict we have is between either two illiberal states, right? The Saudis and the Sudanese, whatever, right? You have two illiberal states, or between a liberal state and an illiberal state, right? Liberal democracies don't go to war.
The Palestinians don't have a state. That's part of the problem. They don't have.
Okay, so they're illiberal actors. Okay, it's an illiberal society. Okay, it's a society that, when polled, says October 7th was great. I mean, it's in the 60 percentage points when you go in Gaza. It jumps up to 80% when you go to the West Bank. You got people that think that
that's after 80,000 Palestinians have been killed.
Yeah, but you've got a group of people.
80,000
Palestinians. How many deals have been offered to the Palestinians? Arafat turned down. A two-state solution with a capital in East Jerusalem.
Right. Okay. Now I've been into the weeds and all this stuff. Unfortunately, I was part of this for a long time. No, I agree, but they're also in an untenable kind of situation.
You know what the deal you could do? Okay. Here's, I think, the deal you could offer the Palestinians. It would take.
Okay. Wait. All right.
Every Israeli shoots themselves Now we have peace. There's not, what deal would the Palestinians take to say, hey, okay, we don't like this, but we're going to have to live for generations frustrated. Land has been taken. We're not going to get the right to return. Israel's not going to get everything they want. We're not going to get everything we want. Hopefully enough sex between our descendants and everybody will be unhappy at dinner tables instead of unhappy. They'll just be dysfunctional intermarried families instead of being warring at war.
You heard it here first. The Scott Jones solution
is intermarriage, right?
Unhappy marriages between
unhappy marriage, right. All marriage is same-sex marriage, because once you get married, it's the same sex every night anyway. So it's all same-sex marriage. I mean, the solution is, okay, you guys aren't going to get what you want. You don't like that Israel got made a state. You don't like Jews. Okay. But guess what? They have a state now. You're going to have to live with it. Okay. We're going to give you a bunch of land, what they've said no to every time. Right. What could get them to yes? I don't think anything gets them to. What gets them to yes is the elimination of Israel.
How much have you spent any time in the West Bank?
No.
All right, how many, what's your breadth of Palestinians that you know?
Probably a handful that I met in my life.
Okay. All right. So I think I would be a little, I think you maybe have simplified. I mean, you sound like conversations I've had with settlers. You really do when you say that.
So Bill, what do you think that a deal that Palestinians, what would make Hamas, Palestinians embrace Israel's legitimacy and give Israel a sense of security?
Two
what deal?
All right, I think no more illegal settlements in the West Bank. When I was there, the last time I was there, the IDF and the Palestinian Authority and the Jordanian army were working in concert. They were constantly talking with each other and working in concert. Gaza's been one thing that's been consistent. The Egyptians didn't know what to do with Gaza. The Israelis didn't know what to do with Gaza. And when they were cut off and basically turned into a blockaded territory, that was a disaster as well. So all of the solutions for Gaza over the last 80 years have none of them worked. So an international something, and the Arab League, which I don't even know if they function anymore as the Arab League, but something different has to happen. I actually don't think it's in Israel's best interest to be the primary governing body over Gaza. Now, in terms of the West Bank, I think you have to stop allowing there to be illegal seizure of Palestinian property. You can't. You can't continue to break the law and add anger and ignore your own laws as a way of turning a blind eye to the people. Some of the same people who assassinated one of your own prime ministers. You can't.
This is false equivalent. This is false equivalency.
No, it isn't, Paul. You cannot. So it's okay.
This is a pox on both their houses.
Wait a minute. It's okay. First of all, you don't merge the West Bank with the Gaza. They're two different situations. However, what's happened in Gaza has further radicalized the West Bank, who has basically been living without having the laws enforced by the Israeli government.
Bill,
principle. Now tell me what's right about that.
Okay, let me give you Hamas official Hamad al-Reged in April 2023 sermon. No, but let me just
no, but I know exactly. Stop it. Just stop it for a second. I know exactly.
I'll stop. All right, I'll stop. Go ahead. You talk.
I'm just saying. But so what? What is there your solution?
No, what I'm saying is what I'm asking you is this: with an official who says Allah transformed them into filthy, ugly animals like apes and pigs because of the injustice and evil they have brought about.
Of course,
and it wants the neck is okay. The political.
You're saying that's okay. You're saying it's okay because there's.
I'm saying when the political chairman of Hamas, the chairman of the political bureau, Saleh al-Uri, in August 2023, says that he wants total war with Israel. Therefore, we are convinced if a total conflict begins the airspace and seaports of this entity will be shut down, and they will not be able to live without electricity, water, and communications.
But
How do
you're
you
saying
what,
Hamas
how do
is
you
the same
deal?
thing as the West
How do,
Bank?
now, how do
Well,
you deal?
I'm
Let's
down
just
two
start with
different
Hamas.
things.
Let's just start with Hamas, right? How would you make a deal with Hamas?
You can't. Well, you can't. All right. So that's why this war happened. But what's happened is, in part, by not dealing with it, and by the way, by Netanyahu thinking he bought them off.
Right, that's fair. Yeah,
he didn't listen to his own security system. So there wasn't anything being done there. It was benign neglect and thinking like,
so you take
let the leadership get rich, which they did. The Hamas, I mean, Hamas is utterly corrupt and it's indefensible. You know, they're an abomination.
But I'm asking you then, what do we do with a group that's illiberal, that doesn't think the other party has a right to exist? How do you get to yes from there? And when you've offered them a two-state solution with a capital in Jerusalem, and they're like, no, not good enough. How do you get to yes?
I don't know how you get to yes, but you don't get peace by oppressing the people who are officially under your care.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to do military occupation things because they're going to kill you. I mean,
there was a situation. It wasn't an occupation. There was a cooperation, but the ongoing, and again, I mean, corruption in the Middle East is a way of kind of doing business. So it is a difficult world. I'm not saying there's an easy solution, but to turn a blind eye to the fact that, first of all, you ignored what was happening in Hamas. Your own intelligence was telling you what's going on there. Okay. And then also to make it life worse for the Palestinian people in the West Bank is not a path for solution. There's no justification for what Hamas has done. Zero. But to pretend.
But even when you think that's not okay, like let's throw away what they've done, right? Let's throw away October 7th, right? Pre-October 7th, you get people elected, democratically elected, that say in their charter, all those people should not exist and die. And it's like, okay, like when Trump says, okay, we're going to get in Elon Musk and get the Doge and cut the thing. The Hamas platform is, okay, kill all the Jews and wipe them off the planet. So how do you negotiate with people?
You can't. I don't think you can't. I don't think that was part of the problem. You can't negotiate with Hamas. But at the same time, the status quo didn't work. What did the status quo get Israel? October 7th.
Oh, no, I don't think the status quo worked. I think probably, I mean, in some sense, probably, I mean, the solution is
you want to bring back the settlements.
No, I mean, well, look, the solution is people are unhappy like I said, for generations, begin to get over it, intermarry, take a two-state deal, and eventually you look back, I can't. Wow, our past involves brutal conflict. Like this country, I mean, in the middle of the 19th century, we killed each other, and then eventually,
now we all get along.
Now we all, I mean, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. But we live together. We intermarry. We have one country, right? We won World War II together. We have a body politic, right? Out of that. Now, I mean, we have a body politic, Bill. We do. I mean, we might not have a government. We might not have a government funded in 2 weeks, but we have a body politic.
We do have a body politic. It's a strange one, but we do. No.
What I'm saying is that okay? That my idea. That's just probably not going to happen. So then, amidst the continued hostilities, what are you going to do? I mean, at some point, somebody's got to win, right? And I think what's going to happen eventually.
Well, I think Israel has won. I mean, again, winning, but Israel is one of the most powerful armies in the world.
Yeah, but they've been restrained. I mean, they could be more aggressive.
Well,
they could be.
You want a nuclear exchange with Iran? I mean, what happens there? It's a small country. You don't need a lot of nuclear bombs to destroy Israel.
Yeah. No, I'm saying eventually people have to radically change, and largely by people, I mean illiberal people have to say, okay, I want to live in a liberal world. I know we want to kill gays here, but we're going to have to live with a neighbor who we hate and who right across the way is having gay dance parties in Tel Aviv. You've got to be able to accept that,
right,
and move on. I think Israel could accept an illiberal state next to it that wasn't attacking it. I think
Well, yeah.
Israel's illiberal neighbors are going to have a tougher time accepting a legitimate Israel.
Well, I mean, Egypt, Jordan.
Egypt, right? I mean, the Abraham
No,
Accords is right, right.
yeah,
Egypt is different, but yeah, it's
and, no,
happened.
and Jordan. I mean,
Jordan,
there's peace treaties. The trouble is the unsettled. I mean, the the dark side, or the the problem of the solution, right? The problem of the 1947 solution, right? I mean, there's a sense where um, one party said yes, the other really didn't, and the party that said yes won its war and won its independence, but there's still this
yeah. And at some point, guess what? After you try to eliminate a state a few times, you got to say, we lost the war. We're
no,
regrouping.
well, no,
We're going to take two states with a capital in East Jerusalem.
right. Well, and again,
that's the other thing. What group that loses wars gets such good deals, right?
Well,
usually when you lose a war, Bill, you're a historian, right? I'm not. But usually what happens in history, right, Bill? I'm not a student of this stuff, but usually what happens is when you get your ass kicked in a war, you kind of take what you're given.
Right. The interesting thing, though, in terms of it hasn't resolved, and that deal, that's whatever was offered at Oslo, and again, I've unfortunately I've read all that and I've talked to people that were there, and again, they're even at the Annapolis talks. I talked to the guy who was the chief navigator. This was a negotiator. I heard a talk he gave. They surprisingly said yes to what the PLO delegation had offered them, and and when they said yes, the PLO went back and withdrew their offer. So I'm with you. I mean, one of the things, the difference, why does Egypt and Jordan have a peace treaty with Israel? Why are the Saudis moving towards that? Why are there? Because they're sovereign countries. They have agency, and they also are getting a lot of American money. So I mean, that's part of the thing.
The right? Abraham Accords, man.
That was the buying him off, and also, and Anwar Sadat gave his life for that thing, right? So it's a complicated situation. I just think you keep a people, but you are not moving towards a solution when, and again, this is just human nature. There's Arabs in the area, including Israeli Arabs and Jewish Israelis. This whole thing it's never been worse in my years of working with it. It's understandable. Yeah. There were most of the systems of Gaza did not like Hamas. All right. And didn't want the war. But it's hard for me to say, well, my family, 3 generations of my family were killed, including my children, and Hamas started this war, and yet it was an Israeli bomb that did it. I mean, it's hard to navigate that emotionally.
Sure, no, absolutely. I mean, although I'm
sympathetic with that, and I'm not saying Israel didn't have a right to defend itself, but nothing that's happened, certainly since October 7th, but nothing that's happened over the last 10 years has moved the process on either side towards resolution. And that may ultimately, you can go back to Oslo or you can go back to others where certainly one thing that's consistent with the Palestinians, they're failed by everybody. They're consistently failed by their own leadership. I mean, that's good. That goes back to, the 1930s, right? But we are further away from any kind of intermarriage and having unhappy in-laws of your utopian vision. That's
not a utopian vision. No, that's the anti-utopia vision, right?
I was joking. Yeah. I was joking about that. That's normalcy, and
that's people just eventually states accept less than ideal situations.
And the trouble is that when I first there was a lot more Arab Israeli West Bank is Arab, Israeli-Jewish interaction. But after the Second Intifada, understandably, with the security measures, um, people have just it's kind of, we talk about this, we live in our silos here, and we don't, we have trouble, we don't listen to each other's newscast. you know it's it's that on steroids. I mean, even the textbooks you read, you read an Israeli textbook about the history,
Yeah,
you
sure,
read
sure.
you read a Palestinian, and neither of them feel quite like how I understand the history. And again, I know why that is, but
But I
it's
mean, but I mean, funny, but with all the complexities which are there and numerous, at the end of the day, it's the civilizational thing, right? You've
yeah,
got one civilization that is closer to what we think of as the United States, the UK, Canada, France, where, hey, you can be gay, hey, you can be whatever religion you want, hey, there's pluralism, hey, there's a sort of individual sovereign rights that come from an Enlightenment tradition that are inviolable. One community has that cultural orientation, one doesn't, right?
right.
So at the end of the day, and this is the Huntington thesis, right? Where, in Clash of Civilizations, when he says after the breakup of the Soviet Union, he says after the age of ideology, all the future conflicts are going to be civilizational, right? And he says, like, they're all going to happen in border. He predicts Ukraine, right? He says that's because it's torn between West, Christian sort of a democratic West, and the sort of Slavic Russian Empire, and they're in the middle, right? And this is the whole thing about, can they be in NATO and can they not, and all this stuff. He former Yugoslavia, he predicted the war in Yugoslavia, all these things, and this Gaza and Israel, this conflict, right? This is a classic Huntington thing, right? Where you have civilizational conflict, and that's just where all the where their civilizational conflict is really hard.
Well, I guess the interesting question too is there a possibility that this clash between liberal and illiberal thinking, okay, let's just say in general, is there's a real possibility that the more liberal, classic liberal, and meaning,
Enlightenment, yeah.
turns in on itself as well. I mean, there's a possibility that liberal societies, in terms of the conflict and clash of civilization, stop being liberal societies.
Well, that's the option, right? That's maybe what's going on today, right? I mean, this is as many people have said. I think the great John Meacham said this is sort of a democratic populist reaction against democracy.
Yeah, and
I mean, it's a populist reaction, right? So a lot of people, I mean, we've talked about this incessantly on the show, but there are a lot of people that have anxiety about the future of liberalism, and you see this, in Europe. You have, what I was going to say is Islamic extremism. You have right wing, white nationalist extremism. You have all these people that are saying, yeah, right, we're not so into the liberal project, and it might be doomed. But right now in this conflict, I'm saying is that you have the illiberal liberal, and I don't think that's something that you can say, okay, we'll give you these acres, okay, we'll give you this section, okay, you're not going to like access to these minerals, you're going to want that, but we'll give you access to these resources. That's stuff that you can't negotiate out like a divorce, right? I mean,
well, the other thing is, and the Palestinians don't have anything that the West wants. It's not like we turn our blind. It's not like
they have stuff Trump wants. They have real estate,
but we turn a blind eye to the Saudis, right? They are a oppressive regime against their own people, but we want their oil, and
we love the Saudis.
And
it's funny how much more. I mean, it's very interesting the things we choose, right? Like how much more progressive is Saudi Arabia than Iran? but they're the totalitarians we like.
And there weren't any Iranians that attacked us on 9/11.
9/11, right?
So it's an interesting thing, but no, I it's the tragedy of the thing is that, and this is sometimes happens in history, right? They missed their moment.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
and the more extreme parties, right? The Hamas or the suicide bombers. In many ways, not only did the suicide bombers kind of kill innocent lives as well as killing themselves. But in many ways, they killed the peace process in the hearts of many Israelis. And I think that, and then you have the kind of, and then when you have people who are willing in the name of God to strangle a baby, then I don't know how you negotiate with that.
No, that's where I think there isn't a
That's the problem.
negotiation. I mean,
That's the problem.
that's that there's no. I mean, it's not something that is negotiable, and which is, I don't know what you do, but I think pretending. I mean, I think what's not helpful is to pretend that the conflict doesn't go all the way down. Like I think what progressives tend to do is think that the deep civilizational stuff is just window dressing, right? Because the left is so pragmatic materialist that really that's just all and really it's just about water or rights or land or this. No. It's about more. It's those things are not inconsequential. But at the end of the day, all that stuff could be equitable, and there's still the civilizational conflict that you can't explain away.
Well, the other thing too is you certainly don't help the Palestinian people by just taking one-sided anti-Israel responses at town meetings in Vermont.
I mean, what better place to really start changing the world? That's what I think. When I think of activist time, but when I think, man, where they're really moving the needle is the town meeting in Vermont. And well,
we do pray for peace. I thank you for. I
think of Miroslav Volf's great quote, "An exclusion, an embrace." I think it's in where he says, often our first move in conflict is that we eliminate our enemy from the fellowship of humanity, and we excuse ourselves from the table of and fellowship of sinners. And so that's getting to any kind of healing always involves negating that move.
Yeah, Father, forgive us because we do not know what we are doing, for sure.
And the beat goes on.
Beat goes on. All right, it was fun. We've been getting angry at each other. I love that.
I like this. We need, if anyone wants to give us counseling.
And by the way, please
send emails.
Send Scott some hate mail. Just it'll make his week.
I would love it. And the beat goes on.
Hey, and peace. We do pray, and also, for those who are in mourning, we our hearts break as well.
Amen.